So I didn't get any free San Diego Comic-Con 2019 exclusives this year to do any early reviews on or to give you any previews or anything. Today, because of San Diego Comic-Con basically starting off, I figured we'd go back and take a look at an exclusive that I kind of picked up on a whim in 2017 that I have never opened, and I've wanted to open it, I just never did it. And I wanted to do a review, but since I never opened it, there was never a review for it. So we're going to go back and take a look at the 2017 Marvel Legends Thor 5-pack. And that's a big reason why I hadn't reviewed this so far. It's 5 figures to review all at once, so it takes a little time. But this thing also does come in a pretty snazzy box, and you can probably see up there, I am not lying when I say I haven't touched this in a while. It is quite dusty. So we've got this guy here in a Pentagon style box. It's incredibly large. I mean, it's really massive. It makes storage kind of weird, but you've got some fantastic artwork of all of the characters that are inside this pack. So Lady Thor, Ulik, Bor, Malekith, all of those figures are done up in the slipcover. And then you can take, of course, take this guy off since it's a slipcover, and you get this guy, which has more of that artwork on the inside there, so you can see more of that stuff there, but it opens up, and it's probably too big for me to actually hold. But you've got all the figures on the inside, so you've got Bor, you've got Malekith, you've got Lady Thor, you've got the Odin son Thor, and then you've got Ulik there at the end. I really dig this packaging. I think it's a cool concept, a cool design. Again, it makes storage kind of weird because how many Pentagon-shaped boxes do you have? But it is really cool. But 2 years later, we're finally going to open this thing. So let's crack all of these out and take a look. And here we go, we've got our 5 figures out of the package. Again, this is the set that was released in 2017, so we've seen a few of these in other ways. One, I think, right before, and then one afterwards, but there are 3 figures in here that are entirely unique to this complete set. And there's some interesting and some weird stuff going on with these figures, so we're going to take a look at them one by one real quick. I'm not going to go over them too much or we'll be here all day, but I'm going to start with the 3 in the middle here. We're going to start with Lady Thor, and then we're going to work our way to the bigger guys. So here's our Lady Thor figure, and this figure is really similar to the mainline release, and that's the one that came out in the Gladiator Hulk Build-A-Figure wave, but there are some interesting differences. It's mostly a paint and deco change, but her accessory is the main draw for this particular version, at least for me. We're going to run through articulation really quick. So the head can look up and down, side to side. Her arms go out, they rotate around. She has bicep swivels. We have got a single rotating elbow here, and then you've got your rotation and hinge at the wrist. We've got a diaphragm joint, so she goes backwards and forwards, side to side, and then she rotates. Legs go out, but not very far. They kick forward and they kick back, but she's of course going to hit that rubber skirt. And then you've got a thigh cut, double jointed knees, the cape's going to get in the way, and then you got rocker and hinge down at those ankles. So she is pretty similar. She's also got coat or cape popping action, as it were, and that honestly is a perfect time to talk about my main gripe with this figure, and it's the same gripe that I had with the regular one. It's just that the cape falls off all the time, so I had to, on the original one, I glued it in place, and I'm likely going to do the same. But I like this figure. I mean, it's all right for what it is. I don't have much attachment to the Lady Thor character or even really the figure, but I think it looks pretty good outside of the fact that she can't keep her cape on very well. But I like the color choices on this one. Little things are different here, like this rubbery flap piece right here is a darker shade of brown on this figure versus the regular one. She's got blue eyes, so she's kind of like powered up. I do like the shape of the cape. I like the kind of inner cape that she has here, the skirt piece, which really kind of flows well with the rubber cape here. And then you've got her accessory, which is the Mjolnir, and the regular one is a just opaque silver metallic hammer. This one is translucent blue, and it shimmers and you can see through it, and it's just really fantastic. So I like the idea of this being kind of like a powered up version. And you know, for someone who doesn't really have much attachment to this version of Thor in any capacity whatsoever, I think she's an alright figure. It just comes down to, do you really care enough about her? And despite the fact that I really don't, I think the figure is pretty cool outside of the fact that the cape just doesn't like to stay on, at least for me. Next up, we've got Malekith, and this is a figure that I'm sure some folks are familiar with just because we got a re-release of him in a brighter color scheme in what wave? An Avengers wave? It has to be. Avengers type wave of some sort. And I've often found myself really close to actually buying him because I see him everywhere. But then I realized that I have this guy at home in the box, so we're finally taking a look at him. And I like the design of this figure. It's a fairly basic figure from the neck down, but I do like the color scheme. I like the design. He's a little bit larger than most standard Marvel Legends, so he looks pretty good. He does, of course, have pretty standard articulation as well. So he goes backwards, down, rotate side to side. Your arms are going to go out, they're going to rotate at the shoulder, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, hinge and swivel at the wrist. You've got an ab crunch, and then you've got a waist twist. Legs go out, forward, backward a little bit, thigh cut, double jointed knees, of course, boot cut, and then you've got your rocker and your hinge. So pretty standard Marvel Legends figure, not much really gets in the way. Even this big head of hair surprisingly allows him to look backwards, or up rather, pretty decently. So that's pretty good. And then again, it's for the most part just kind of a standard figure. He does of course have the rubbery skirt piece, which doesn't seem to really get in the way. You've got a free floating belt, but most of the figure is just a standard body with this paint scheme applied to it. And on the torso and arms, it looks pretty good. There is a little splotchiness down here on the legs, and of course, since he's got these straight lines that are running up, you really do break things up when you have to twist the joints a little bit, which I don't personally like, but I kind of understand that, you know, that's the nature of things. Otherwise, though, I do think the figure looks pretty cool. I love the kind of sawtooth blade that he's got here for his massive sword. I like the shoulder pads that are added on, and these are a separate piece that kind of wrap around the neck. So this neck piece here, free floating, you could take it off if you want, but it's got the shoulder pads attached to it, and then you've got this big flowing head of hair with a little bit of wash in there to bring out some of that sculpt. But I mean, one of the key things that draws you into this figure is clearly the color scheme on the face, and then of course that division right down the middle. I like the maniacal grin here. I like the pupilless eyes, and outside of the fact that, you know, again, he's kind of a basic design, and he's on one of the more basic style bodies when it comes to Legends, this is still a pretty cool figure, and I'm glad I finally got a hold of this one in hand and not just sort of looking at it behind plastic. Now this guy is kind of the counterpart to a figure that we got in the Gladiator Hulk wave. So that wave had the young Thor figure, which I recall absolutely not liking. Is just a very boring, basic design, painted on clothes, all that stuff, the whole deal for what should have been a bigger figure in that wave for my money. But I do think that the Odin's Son, the unworthy Thor here, I think is pretty cool. And I'm not too familiar with what's going on when it comes to why he's this way. It's not my thing at this point. But I do like the design here. I like what we're seeing. So we've got, as far as articulation goes, another pretty standard body. Head goes up, down, side to side. You've got arms that rotate out. They do seem to be kind of ratcheted almost, and then they rotate. You've got a bicep swivel, you've got double jointed elbows, of course, and then we've got a rotating and hinging wrist. Ab crunch goes all the way over, back pretty far. You've got your waist twist, legs go out all the way, kick forward and backward a little bit, thigh cut, double jointed knees, and then you got your rocker and your hinge down at those ankles. So he is, for all intents and purposes, kind of a standard, but again, like Malekith, the standard but slightly larger scale Marvel Legends figure. And for a Thor figure, I'm pretty happy with the way this turns out. I like the painted on chest hair. The only thing I really don't like is this little piece here. It's one of those floating bands to kind of enhance the sculpt of the basic bicep, and it just pops off and on. You might have to glue it on. I will likely do that, but I really like whether it's a robot arm or just a metal arm, I really like the idea behind it. It definitely breaks up just the look of this figure. And then of course the black asymmetrical design here works really well. You've got these big gaudy looking knee pads here with some kind of basic wraps for his shin guards down there. You've got a free floating piece for this wrap over here, and then you've got your very tattered and worn cape, which does have a little bit of an overspray to kind of bring out the sculpt and just give it a little bit more flair. He's got whatever axe this is called. I am not in the right place to know what it's called, but we've got a very, very shiny metallic silver blade with just kind of a standard wooden handle. And of course, you've got this pretty nice head sculpt. I like this one. I definitely like it a lot more than that young Thor's head. You've got the beard, all the paint on it's really clean. The hair, I like the sculpt, the flow of it, and then there's more wash in there. Really, it's the beard that does it for me when it comes to the face on this, but the entire figure in general, despite the fact that I really don't have much frame of reference for what's going on at this moment for Thor, I like the way it looks. It's the complete package. It's that tattered cape, it's this axe, it's that head sculpt, and then of course the very much non-human arm. One of the obviously bigger figures in this set is Ulik here, and this guy's pretty interesting. There is some definite cool stuff going on, but there is some definite weird stuff from a construction standpoint, and then some articulation that I didn't expect to find here as well. So we've got a head that is pretty limited on this guy just because he is so wide. He's got really shallow shoulders, and he's got this big head of hair, so he doesn't really do a whole lot except rotate. You can get him down a little bit, but mostly he just sort of flails around. The arms go out, but they only go out this far. They don't go any further than that. And then they rotate at the shoulder. You've got your bicep swivel, single jointed elbows, and then you've got hinges and rotation at his wrists. He's got an ab crunch. He goes backwards just a little, and he goes forwards a little. Rotates at the waist. He's got ball jointed hips here, which I was not expected to find. So you can bobble him around. He goes out, he kicks forward, and he kicks backward only slightly. So this was kind of odd to see. I wasn't expecting that. You've got a thigh cut. You've got a single jointed knee. They're really, really thick joints. And then you've got rocker, and you've got hinges down at the ankles. So he is kind of limited in a number of ways. A lot of that just comes down to, well, his sculpt and his design. He's a big, wide, beefy character, so I'm not too surprised that he doesn't move as well as, you know, any of the other characters we've looked at thus far, but he definitely does seem to be kind of odd, especially when it comes to those hips. I just wasn't expecting that. Otherwise, though, I think for the most part, this guy looks pretty solid. He is really robust, really beefy. He has a lot going for him in terms of size. And for comparison's sake, here he is next to the Thor that we just looked at, so you can see that he is quite big. You know, he's kind of on the Build-A-Figure side of things when it comes to overall height, plastic, that whole deal. But I do think that the figure at a base level is pretty cool. There is a lot of sculpted detail all over this guy, all over these arms. You can see we've got more of this hair. He's got kind of the brass knuckle thing going on. You've got these wild two-toed feet, a lot of shading down there, more sculpt, more craggy, kind of rocky texture. He's got this big emblem that sits in his chest, and everything up here is sculpted, all of these scales, which are a nice shiny green metallic. You've got some non-metallic green for the kind of suspender straps on his arms with some silver paint up there, and then he's got more of those scales all over his back. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. One thing that I really don't understand and I don't like is why he's got these pinholes through his arms like that. I feel like those could have easily been done a different way because they are quite eye-catching and very much distracting to me. I mean, I'm sure I'll get over them eventually, but they definitely do really, really stand out to me. And then lastly, you've got this head sculpt, which I think looks pretty fantastic. Again, it does kind of hinder articulation a little bit when it comes to its size and shape, but that's what he's supposed to look like. He's got a big, wide head of hair. He's got those nice pointy ears, the kind of underbite fangs that stick out, the very, very red and angry looking eyes, and it's just well executed, well sculpted, and really, really well painted. So outside of kind of some limited articulation and these holes here, I think he does look really fantastic, and realistically for my needs, he needs to look big and imposing, and he definitely fills those roles pretty well. And last but certainly not least, we have the figure that ultimately I wanted the most out of this set, Boar. And this guy is basically a Build-A-Figure that's been crammed into this box set, really. Ulik is huge. This guy is a little bit bigger, seems a little more grander in scale. Ulik is, kind of short and stocky. This guy is just like a beefed up human. So there is a lot of cool stuff going on with this one. Let's take a look at articulation though. He is interesting. He's a little different than normal. So you've got a head that can look up a little bit. He's got a ball peg. He's not got a hinge. He goes down, rotates side to side, and then a little bobble. Arms go out at the shoulder, and then they do, of course, rotate. This armor piece does get in the way though, so when you try to push his arms in, they're only going to go so far. They rotate at the bicep. You've got a rotating and hinging single jointed elbow, and then you've got hinge and rotation at the wrist. He's got a waist twist. He has legs that can go out really far and kick forward because he also has ball hinges at the hips there, which is, again, kind of weird. This loincloth piece does kind of get in the way because it's kind of thick. He goes back, you can rotate at the thigh. You've got your double jointed knees, but they only go back so far because he's got these massive boots. There is a shin swivel down there, and then you've got rocker, and you've got hinges down at those ankles. So he is pretty standard, but he's also just not the same as a lot of other figures because we've got just the waist twist, you've got an actual ball jointed head, and then you've got your ball hinge legs, which, despite the fact that we saw those twice in this box set, are definitely not common, at least not anymore, and really weren't all that common at the time this box set came out. So that's kind of interesting, but otherwise, I mean, I think he looks pretty fantastic. And just like with Ulik, here he is next to Thor, so you can see that they definitely are quite different in scale. Bor is quite on the large side when it comes to comparisons to a more standard Marvel Legends, and he does have a lot of stuff going on here, not just his size. I mean, he's got this really fantastic, very, very ancient looking armor with a lot of paint on it. There's a lot of dry brushing on there to bring out some of that sculpt, so layers of dark brown and that light brown. You've got your loincloth piece down here with some chainmail that sits underneath it. You've got the humongous wraps on the boots, which have a lot of paint in there for just the shading purposes. And then, of course, he's got some bracers on his wrists. You've got your giant war axe here, which has a lot of pitted damage, some metallic gray paint, and you've got your big medieval shield over here with some brown and some of that same metallic silver. It can clip on his wrist, or he can hold it. Just, you pick your poison, whichever one you want to do. So he has a lot of stuff going on for him just because of the type of character he is and just the way he looks. And you can certainly kind of put him into other lines as well because he just looks like a giant warrior, which I think works really well. And of course, that head sculpt lends itself to that look. You've got those massive horns coming out of this helmet. He's got that long red beard. He's got a very, very stern expression on his face. Great sculpt. Very nice paint applications. There's a lot of wash in that beard to bring out that detail as well. And outside of what is maybe kind of limited, slightly wonky articulation in places, this figure is really, really solid. This is something that I could have definitely seen being a Build-A-Figure in a Thor wave in particular. It kind of screams that. But this is definitely a nice figure that adds a little bit of shelf presence, and again, is something that you can use in different lines just because of his rather generic warrior look. So overall, this is a pretty fun set. I probably should have opened this a long time ago, but of course if I did, we wouldn't be doing this video now, so I guess everything worked out. These figures are pretty solid. I suppose a lot of this comes down to your appreciation for Thor and maybe some of the more ancillary things. Ulik is maybe not a must-have. Bor is probably not a must-have, but he makes for a really fun figure that could have definitely been a Build-A-Figure. This variant of Lady Thor kind of fits at the time frame. Malekith is definitely something that fits in this, and then I like the idea of getting this unworthy Thor to kind of complement and contrast the young Thor that came out at the same time in that Gladiator Hulk wave. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. Maybe not the biggest powerhouse type of exclusive that Hasbro has ever come out with. It definitely wasn't hard to get at the time, but now that I've opened it, I have a little bit better appreciation for these figures, especially Ulik and Bor. They're going to make some fine additions to my shelves for sure. So that's going to do it for this look at the Marvel Legends San Diego Comic-Con 2017 Thor 5-pack. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.